In this final video, we'll take all of our renders and we'll put them together in the compositing stage. So let's jump into After Effects. Okay, so here we are in After Effects. Let's go to our project window and we can go to, actually let's go to File. When you need to bring lots of, when you need to bring in lots of separate sequences, it's really good to go to import multiple files. It's just a bit of a time saver. So if we click on this, it opens up a browser window. We can go to our, let's go to our MoGraph countdown render builds folder. In here, we've got our, look, we've got 5 separate scenes which we need to comp together. So let's just bring these in one by one. So we've got our one smoke. We'll double click on this, go to the render. So if you click on an image sequence, it says we have this open sequence setting, and that means if you've got that ticked, if all you have to do is click on any of these images and it will find its neighboring files within a sequence and bring them all in as an image sequence. So we always want to have that sequence selected. Let's hit import, and what it does, it brings it in, but then it keeps this dialog open, this window open, so we can then bring in some more files. So we've got countdown 1 smoke. Let's get 4 crumble, render. Let's bring that one in. And then we'll bring in 6 fill. Bring that one in. And then we'll bring in 3 to Advect. Bring that one in. And then finally, we've got our combined. Now remember, in our combined one, we've actually got 2 sequences here. We've got our beauty pass, and if we scroll right down, we've got our emission pass, which is just the fire element. So let's bring in that beauty first, and then you can click on any of these files. It doesn't have to be the first one, any of them, and then it will recognize the sequence and import it in. And then we can do done. Right, so now we've got all of our sequences. Excellent. So let's just bring in our 6 fill to start with. And if you drag it onto this little icon here, it'll make a new composition from that sequence. And there we've got our 6 fill. Now, at the moment, we're viewing this, and this is giving us a representation of our transparency of our alpha. So to get rid of that transparency grid, you just press this toggle button, and then we can see it rendered on black, which is the look that we're going to go for. And there's our 6 fill. Okay, so what we could do is let's just right click. So it's made this composition here, and it's named it the same as the sequence, but actually this is going to be our kind of master composition. So let's just right click on that, rename it, and let's just call it XP Countdown Master Comp. All right. And then if we click down here, so we're inside the composition, we can then change the settings because we're going to need more time in this. So let's go to Composition, Settings, and we'll change the duration to, well, look, let's just make it 20 seconds, and that's going to give us more than enough. And now we've got more frames in our composition here. So here's our 6 fill. What we want to do is we want to have at least a second pre-roll on this. So we'll move that, and then you can see that we have this first frame which is incorrect, and that is, remember, the quirk of when we're using the open VDB mesher with that bool, and it creates this first frame before the bool operation takes place. So we just need to, we can take this time slider to zoom in, and we can just go forward a frame. So our first frame is the first part of the splash. Okay, very good. And let's have that start on after 1 second pre-roll. There we go. Excellent. So let's just let that run all the way through. And that is it. Excellent. So what we could do is, let's just have a look. It's looking nice. I think we could, at this point, let's just add the smallest touch of additional contrast to this to make it pop just a little bit more. So we'll go to Effect. Let's go to Color Correction, and we'll just do we'll do a curves. And here's our contrast curve for our RGB. And what we could do is let's just darken down the lows, lighten up the lights, and it creates this added contrast, and then just the image just pops a little bit more. So if I just leave it there and I switch that curves off, that's what it was. And a little bit of added contrast just makes it pop a little. Great. Okay, and we'll leave that there for now. Let's go back to our project. So next what we need to do is incorporate our big kind of combined scene, our 654 combined. So here is our combined. Let's drag that in, and we'll just put that below our number 6 and move it forward in our composition. So where are we? Where our 6 just fills up, we then want it to splash. So it goes bloop, 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 splash. So let's move this back to this point. There we go. There is our splash frame. Let's have a look. Splash. So obviously we want this 6 to disappear, but we don't want it to disappear immediately. We want it to be visible on this frame, and it's going to give the illusion that the splash is spitting out from the 6. So if we go to our number 6 file, hit T to bring up the opacity, and we'll put a keyframe on this frame. Let's move forward one more frame and put the opacity to 0. And it'll automatically make another keyframe. So now we've got the 6 and then it disappears. And this happens really quickly, but it just tricks the eye into feeling that the splash comes from that 6. Okay, good. So what would be nice, if we go to this first frame, let's just make that 6 invisible for now. We haven't got any motion blur on this, and this water's splashing out really quickly. So what would be nice would be some motion blur. Now we can add motion blur without any third-party plugins in post in After Effects. If we just go to our splash layer, if we go to Effect and we go to the time menu, we have Pixel Motion Blur, which can work really well, but it's not going to work for us here. Let's click it on. So this motion blur doesn't look correct. Look, if we go to the next frame, it looks really good. We're getting this motion blur as it's blurring out in the direction in which it's traveling. But on the first frame, it's all messed up. And that's because it doesn't have the preceding frame to kind of work out in which direction these pixels should be moving. And so it's not going to work for us in this instance. So let's get rid of you. We'll delete that motion blur. But we can fake a bit of motion blur because the way in which this explosion is exploding, it's exploding out from this central spot. So let's go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and we're just going to use Radial Blur. Now by default, look, it's giving us, if I put the blur amount up, it's kind of spinning and twisting it around, which is obviously not what we want. But if we change the type from spin to zoom, then we can use this widget to show the center of that blur. Let me put it up low so you can see what's happening. And look, can you see it's blurring out from this center spot, and we can move that around. So if it was going from left to right, so this is going to work for us really well. We can just cheat it. So let's put this amount down to say 30. And so there we've got this blur. And once we've got to this stage, we probably don't need it anymore. So let's just, on that first frame, put a keyframe on 30. Let's move forward, say 4 frames, and put that down to 0. And now we've got a bit of fake motion blur. Great. And it's such a fast thing that arguably you don't even need it. But these little things can often make a difference. All right. Good. So that's looking nice. Now, again, we've got a little slight, it's not really an issue, but this is looking a little bit washed out, isn't it? This number 5. What would be handy again is if we can just make this pop a little. So we'll do that again with another contrast curve. So let's go to Effect, Color Correction. Let's bring in a Curves. And we just want the slightest bit of added contrast in this shot. Not much. Just a little bit. And then if I A-B that on and off, so here it is on, here it is off, it's just making it just pop a little bit. We could perhaps go a little bit more aggressively on it. Something like that. So let's A-B it again. It's just making it cut through. And again, a very subtle difference, but these subtleties are what make these comps look good. So there we go, down to our 5, and then there comes our fire. Fantastic. So at this point, we can introduce our, let's go back to our project window. We can introduce this extra pass that we did that was just the fire. So let's just bring that down on top of this one. And obviously we need to line it up so it's at the same time. So this doesn't have an alpha channel. This is our fire pass, just the fire. And if we then change the blend mode from normal to say screen, we're going to get this heightened fire look. If we go to add, we're really going to blow out the highlights and make it feel really hot. Now, it's an interesting point to debate, really. A lot of people, when doing fire, get obsessed with trying to get as much of this fiery detail in as possible. Let's just put that blend mode off and back to normal. And want lots of this really fiery, hot and darker bits, this contrasty bits. But the reality is, in this type of shot, let's just take off that. In this type of shot, where the camera is exposed for the studio lighting to expose for these objects, if there was suddenly a load of fire, it would be completely overexposed. These hot bits would be too hot and would be overly bright. So what we actually want is something like the add mode that really blows it out, because that's how it would expose. But of course, this is abstract, so we can have a bit of a middle ground where we retain some of this nice fiery detail, but we still have some of the hot bits. So what we're going to do to make this look a little bit interesting, let's play around with this. And in order to get this to work, what we'll need to do is let's pre-compose just our emission layer. So we'll right-click, let's go pre-compose, and let's change the name of this one to Fire Layer. Hit OK. So now we have a new composition and everything looks the same. But now we're able to go inside this composition and make some adjustments to this to make it look better. So first of all, let's do some contrast first. So we'll go to Effect, just highlight the layer. We'll go to Effect, Curves, and again we'll do a nice contrast curve on this. Crush down some of those blacks to make it really contrasty. That's looking very fiery, isn't it? Good. So then what we'll do is let's do a layer, new, and we'll do an adjustment layer on top. And in that adjustment layer, we're going to go to Effect, Time, and we'll do some pixel motion blur. And for us, it's going to work brilliantly on this fire. Okay, so on the pixel motion blur, the higher the shutter angle, the higher the blur. So let's put that on, say, 500. So now we've got it blurring. Can you see a little bit of stepping here? So let's increase the shutter samples to, say, 10 to reduce that stepping, and there it's reduced out. So now we've got this really hot, fast-moving fire. Great. Now we've got the motion blur, though, we've lost some of that nice detail. So what we can do is we can get some of that back. Let's go to Layer, New. Let's do another adjustment layer on top. And on this one, we're going to go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen. And let's do some sharpening. So with this filter, we can just say, put this up to 50. And this is, look, it's brought back some of that detail, but we've still got the benefit of our motion blur. So that's a really good technique to bring back some of your detail. Very nice. So now let's do one more thing. Let's try and make this feel a bit super bright. Let's go to Effect, Stylize. Let's bring a glow into this. And let's just make the radius a lot bigger. So this makes the glow radius bigger. You see it's coming out. And then the threshold, the higher this percentage, it will only start affecting the really bright areas, which is obviously what we want. So now only the very bright areas are getting this glow. If I just turn that glow on and off, here it is on, there it is off, here it is on, there it is off. So that's making a really nice difference. All right. Okay, excellent. So now that we have done that, let's go back to our master comp. And here we have got the result. So now we've got the glow on, it's really kind of blown out a bit, isn't it? So perhaps, look, we could take this down from the add and change it to the screen mode. And now we're getting over bright, but we've still got some of that detail and some of that glow showing through. So that's looking really cool. Very nice. So let's just play that into the RAM. It'll take a little bit of time. So we've got our fake motion blur into our splash. And what I really like is when we get our 5 fill. I think it's my favourite element, the way that this squidgy stuff splodges in and then it kind of has this secondary motion as it kind of wiggles around inside. And then at this point, here comes our fire pass, which is going to make its way in. So here we go. And it burns away, goes super hot. We've got some of the nice kind of fire and tearing that's left behind before it all melts away. I think that's really successful. The motion blur is working brilliantly here. That looks really cool. I'm very pleased with that. Okay, let's play that in real time. So splash, 5, and then the burn. Great. Okay, and we can see, look, our holdout Matavar number 4 here. So let's bring that element in now. So let's go back to our project window. And where we have our 4 crumble. This needs to come underneath our fire. So let's bring it down to the bottom. Let's drag it across. And here we have our 4 crumble. Now, we're going to have to do a little bit of freeze framing and adjusting this to get the timing right. So if we think our fire comes up, we have the motion of the lines moving up here, look, and then it falls. So we kind of want it to fall probably about this point. Let's have a look. There it moves up. And then we want it to freeze frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control and D, which makes a duplicate. And on this duplicate, I want to get it where the animation of the lines finishes. So let's just make our fire invisible for now. So where this animation of the lines finishes, before the crumble starts, there, I want this to be a freeze frame. So let's go to Layer, and we can go to Time, and we can go to Freeze Frame. So now this top layer is just frozen in time. All right, excellent. And then we can... So then we can take our bottom layer and hide it up until the point where the freeze frame happens. Okay. So then we need to do another duplicate. Let's duplicate this layer. And this duplicate, we want it to start... Actually, we could make this a bottom one. We want it to start here. And we want it to end on the freeze frame. Okay? So now, this is what we have. Let's move our freeze frame to the end. And then let's move this one to that freeze frame keyframe. So now we have the animation on, the freeze frame, and then the animation down. And obviously we need that freeze frame to become invisible. So we've just managed to elongate that paused period. And here comes our crumble. Excellent. Now, we may also need to make a freeze frame at this beginning point. So let's just hit Control D to duplicate this one. On this one, let's go to Layer, Time, Freeze Frame. So this is frozen at this point. So then let's take, actually we'll move that to the bottom. And then let's select all of the above layers and move that to here. So now we have freeze frame, animation, freeze frame, crumble. Perfect. And we might need to adjust this, but this just allows us to get the timing spot on. Let's bring our fire back in. So at this point, our 4 needs to be visible, so that's working fine. There's our 4. And so this freeze frame is too long, which is fine. Let's just move that up to there. Select all of them. Move them back. And we just want to get this timing right. That's looking good. I think this freeze frame is slightly too long. Oops, got them all selected. Let's just select this top layer. Reduce the length of that keyframe. Let's bring that back to there. Reveal and crumble. That's looking good. Let's take that alpha off. Up and crumble. That's looking nice. Excellent. And crumble. Perfect. Okay. So now we need to, this is revealing our number 3. So we need to bring our number 3 into our comp. And it looks like we're running out of frames, doesn't it? How many have we got on here? 20. We might need some more frames. Let's just go to our master comp settings. So composition, settings. What do we have it on? 20. Let's put it on 25, which is going to give us enough time on there. Okay, so now we're going to bring in our, now we want to bring in our, what do we need? Our number 2 advection sequence. Let's bring that to the bottom. And this needs to live underneath this number 3. And again, we're going to have to freeze frame this at the beginning. So let's hit Control D. And on the bottom one, let's go to Layer, Time, Freeze Frame. And then we can choose exactly when we want this to start. So it needs to be visible here. There we go. I think I must have freeze framed that on frame 0 before it's actually visible. So let's just delete that time remap, which was the freeze frame. And let's go back to Layer, Time. And actually, let's just pick, let's make sure we're at the right frame. So on frame, we'll solo this layer. There we go. So that's at the beginning. So now we can go to Layer, Time, Freeze Frame. Okay, so now we have the correct. Excellent. So we'll unsolo it. Now what you're going to see here is this. Can you see that when our 3 becomes visible, we can see it poking around the edge of our number 3, which is supposed to be hiding it. And the reason that is happening is because, remember, we used the number 3 as the emitter source for our number 3. But the particles, this isn't production resolutions. These particles have a radius. So you can just see them poking out from our number 3. And what we need to do is fix that. And the way we're going to do that is very simply, actually. Let's go to our layer and we'll go to Effect and we're going to go to Matte. And we're just going to do a simple choker. And what this is going to do, it's going to, you can basically expand or decrease the alpha matte. So if I just solo this layer now, and if I go to matte, this is the alpha channel. And if you watch, if I bring up that choker, you see it's cutting into the alpha. So if we then go to final output, it's going to bring it in. So all we need to do, let's unsolo that. All we need to do is just choke that until it's not visible. Okay, and then hit a key. Actually, we don't need to keyframe this because this is the freeze frame. So that's fine. So now it's not visible, right? So what we could do, as soon as these start falling, we can just start bringing them back in. So let's hit a keyframe. We'll go forward a few frames and then we can just take that away. At this stage, it doesn't matter. There we go. And it just cleans up that transition. And in actual fact, let's just move that keyframe. Let's hit U, which reveals the keyframes. And then this other one, let's just move it out a bit. So, yeah, they're still occluded. That looks great. Okay, let's just have a little bit more room so we can see that. Perfect. Okay, that's fine. Very nice. And then our secondary element comes in. So at this point, obviously, we need to hide our freeze frame one. And one frame over, that's it. And there's our number 2 with our advection. That's looking great. So let's have a look. Fire burns it off into the 4. Crumble, crumble, crumble. And then number 3 turns into a 2. And then advection. So before we bring in our number 1, let's just have a look. Before we bring in our number 1, I'm just looking at the timing of this smoke. And it feels like we don't have enough dynamic movement in the explosion bit. The poof. And I'm thinking that the timing feels perfect, but then here, poof, I feel like it should be a bit quicker. So let's just do a bit of time remapping to make that happen. So with our layer in question, this is our 2 advection layer. Let's go to layer, time, and we want to go enable time remapping. And what will happen is, look, it's put a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end, and everything is happening exactly the same. But now we can do a bit of time remapping to get this animation to look a bit better. So at the point where I want it to speed up, which is here, what we're going to do is add another keyframe by pushing this add button. So now I've added a keyframe. Now again, nothing has changed. And the bit that we want to speed up is probably just that bit from there to there. So let's add another keyframe. And again, by adding these keyframes, we haven't adjusted the timing at all. We've just added more keyframes. But now what I can do is select these last 2, move them closer towards each other, and this, between this keyframe and this keyframe, is still the same speed it always was. Between this keyframe and this keyframe, it's still the same speed it always was, but we've sped up these bits by moving those keyframes closer together. And then it goes back to normal speed. And if we go here to this button, the graph editor, you will see what we've done. Here are the first 2 keyframes at the correct rate. Here are the last 2 keyframes at the correct rate, but the speed ramps up between the middle 2. Okay, let's just switch that graph off. Let's have a look and get a feel for it. And that just gives it a bit of a boost. We could even try it a bit quicker. Yeah, that works nicely. Perfect. That's really good. That gives that, and it's such a subtle thing, but it makes such a difference having that quick explosion. Fantastic. I'm very, very pleased with that. So let's just get back to the end of this section. So our smoke's looking nice, but remember we said because we're not at production resolution here and the camera's close to this, and we use linear interpolation of our volume rendering, we're getting a slight bit of voxelized blockiness here. So we're going to fix this by just blurring it out slightly. So let's go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and we will go with Fast Box Blur. And at this stage, it's all fine. And then here, let's go to our Fast Box Blur and hit a keyframe on the blur radius of 0. And then we're just going to blur it up to say, not much, 2 maybe, or even could we push 3? Might be a bit blurry. Let's have a look. And we could, yeah, I mean, we could perhaps, let's hit U to get all of our keyframes up. So here is our fastbox blur. There's our keyframe. Let's try 5. I'm just going to move that keyframe out a bit so it's a bit of a more gradual transition. Yep, okay, so that's helped. So let's just A-B that so you can see it. So this is with the blur. Let's just take that effect off. Without the blur, a little bit voxelized. With the blur, it just fools your eye. Now, our eyes aren't really going to be watching this smoke because at this point we're going to bring in our number 1 reveal. But let's just try and get it as clean looking as possible. Great, so let's just collapse all of these menus. So finally, we want to go back to our project. We need to bring in our 1 smoke. So let's bring that down to the bottom. Now the 1 smoke we actually want on top of this final layer. There's our 1 smoke. And let's have a look. What we need to do is match this up now. So what we're looking for is these bits of smoke, as they penetrate our geometry, we need to match them up so they're happening at the same time. So let's just move it forward, maybe 1 more frame. Let's have a look for that. That's maybe, there we go. So something like that. There it is, you can see the effect working. Okay, it's looking a bit dull though, isn't it, our number 1? So let's have a look at what we can do. So, I mean, one strategy would be just to duplicate it, hit Control-D, duplicate that, and the top one, we could just do maybe a screen blending mode, and look how it really brightens that up. Another option to add a little bit more depth to this number 1 would be, let's just go to the base layer below, hit Control-D, and on this one, we're going to multiply to bring some of the shadows in. And then the top one, let's change it to add. And now what we have got is a really much more contrasted number 1. That's actually looking really good. And then it disappears to nothing. Let's have a look. Great. So I think we're just about there. Let's go and activate our first frame. So here we go. Here's the animation. The 6 fills up. Let's just get a bit more room so we could see it in all its glory. So here we go. 6 fill. Up it goes. And boom, splash out into the 5. Burns away into the 4. Crumble, crumble, crumble. Revealing the 3. Collapse to the number 2, advection, number 1, and disappear. Excellent, very pleased. So one more criticism. Our 1, because we used that linear interpolation and we're not at a huge voxel count, we are getting a little bit of a voxelized feel here, aren't we? So what we could do, let's just take our base layer. Let's go to... Let's just get to a point before here. That's fine there. Let's go to Effect, Fastbox Blur, and we'll hit a keyframe, and then go forward a frame. Let's just blur out the bottom one, and that might be enough. Let's have a look. That's better. I think we're going to have to do possibly the same. So what we could do is select the effect, hold Control and hit C to copy, then select our 2 other layers and hit Control V, which will paste that effect into the top layers as well. Let's have a look. A little bit too blurry at the end, isn't it? I think. So let's hit U. And the top 2 layers, let's go to our last keyframe, and instead of it being 6 on our top 2, let's put it down to 3 or even maybe 2 so it's not as blurred. Yeah, that's looking all right. Okay, so let's have a look from the beginning. Number 6 fill, here it comes, and splash, shrink. Here comes our burn, burns away nicely. Collapse comes. This is my favourite shot, I think. The crumble into the 2, advection, and then into R1, and then fade. So I'm not actually happy with that blur at the end, because the problem is, of course, we lose this detail in our highlight on the glass object, which actually doesn't work for me. So let's just, I mean, we'll try removing one at a time. We might get rid of all of those top layer blurs. Let's take away the add layer blur. Well, that, I mean, that look, that does help, doesn't it? Because that retains some of that detail. Let's just play that last little bit. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm happy with that. So let's have one last run through, and then we're going to call this done. So here we go. Fill, fill, fill into our splash. This works really nicely. There comes our fire. Collapse our number 4 into the 3. Here comes the advection, and then our number 1. And then disappear. Fantastic. So we made it. It's been a long, long journey, but we've got to the end. And we've successfully recreated this fantastic piece of work by our art department. And we've done it, remember, even at a lower resolution. This isn't production resolution. And even that said, our finished effort is pretty decent. I think we can be proud of ourselves. This is looking very good. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Until our next training series, I'll see you later.